Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our television and webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, we are very pleased that you are participating with us today. For 120 years, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. We're committed to providing a welcoming venue for discussion and debate on issues that impact our daily lives. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public figures from across our country and around the world, like today's guest speaker, the Honourable Brad Duguid. Before I formally introduce the Minister, here's a snapshot of some of our upcoming events. On Friday, November 18th, Newfoundland and Labrador's Premier, the Honourable Dwight Ball, will speak about his province's plans for sustainable growth. And on Wednesday, November 23rd, the Honourable Bob Chiarelli, Ontario's Minister of Infrastructure, will address the club on his government's plans for infrastructure development in Ontario. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I want to express special thanks to our Ontario series sponsors, Bruce Power and the Carpenters District Council of Ontario, and also to today's event sponsors, Bombardier and DealNet Capital. Thank you for your generous support. And now our guest speaker. On September the 23rd, the Honourable Brad Duguid received his mandate letter from the Premier. It outlined key priorities for the Queen's Park veteran in his role as Minister of Economic Development and Growth. To summarize, he is to help grow a strong, innovative economy that provides employment and opportunity for all. No easy task. From an economic perspective, the Ministry of Economic Development and Growth reports that there is positive growth. As we all know, we live in an age of constant change. Many factors can slow or accelerate growth, including the investment climate and changing technology. We're pleased that Minister Duguid is with us today to share his vision for how the business community and government can partner to drive economic growth. The MPP for Scarborough Centre has worked on fostering economic growth in a number of key ministerial portfolios. Prior to his current role, he was Minister of Economic Development, Employment and Infrastructure, and Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities. He's also served as Ontario's Minister of Economic Development and Innovation. He was instrumental in the creation of Bill 11 that focused on job creation and investment. That bill helped to establish the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund and the Eastern Ontario Development Fund. In all of his ministerial roles, he has been committed to building partnerships and promoting Ontario as an ideal place to work, invest, and thrive. He's been one of our province's strongest economic advocates. Minister, welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
I can't believe you didn't mention the Canadian Club. Well, thank you so much, Fred. And I said to Fred as I came up, Fred's originally from Newfoundland, and one thing that's not on my resume, and the media are here today and they might want to write about this or go back in time and see if people have stories about it, but I used to DJ in a club called the Caribou Club out in the East End, which was about 200 to 300 Newfies and it was famous in Newfoundland, that would come and party every Friday and Saturday night, and we'd have live rock bands there. And I thought you looked familiar, Fred, and I'm beginning to think you're one of those guys I helped throw out of that place a couple times. But it is absolutely great to be here. Fred, thanks for that introduction. Thank you to the Canadian Club for inviting me here to join you here today. You know, there's been so many important, gifted speakers that have been on this podium. You almost made me nervous when you said, 120-year-old club, and you think back to those 120 years. And then you said that this is on TV, and I didn't realize that. And then I look over and I see the kids' table over here with all the media that have come, and I thank them for coming all the way from Queen's Park to the Royal York to join us. I really am honored to be here with each and every one of you here today. And I have been here before. I'm one of those guests that have been privileged to be invited back. So I don't know what I said when I was here last time. It was April of 2010, I believe. I don't even know what ministry I was in at that point in time. Don't remember what I said. And if you remembered, I probably wouldn't have been invited back. But I'm pleased to be here. And I think back, it's been a long time since I've been here. So I miss you all. At the same time, when I look out, I can see that many of you I see on a weekly basis. So I don't miss you that much. But when you think about the time since the last time I was here, since 2010, a lot has changed in the world. But when you think about just the last week alone, a lot has changed in the world. I mean, think about it. President-elect Donald Trump. Most of us would never, ever have thought we'd utter those words. But now, I know this speech was billed originally as to talk about the new economy, and we're going to get to that. But the fact is, I know there are a lot of Canadians who have been just a little bit knocked off balance by Donald Trump's election win last week. And I think it's really important that we talk about that a little bit. I think it's important that we also quickly regain our footing. While Donald Trump's victory may present some very potential challenges for Ontario that we can't underestimate, I believe it also provides opportunities. At the same time, it is crucially important that we continue our relentless efforts to lead the new economy. We must not be deterred or thrown off in any way by the reality that Donald Trump will soon be sworn in as the 45th President of the United States of America. I believe there's a lot to be learned from the election results south of the border. It may be that when we think about it, that we seem quite different than the U.S. I think Canadians often think of ourselves as being quite different, and in many ways we are. But let's not kid ourselves. There are more similarities than there are differences. Some of what we've seen in the U.S. can also apply to Ontario, and I think directly apply to Ontario and Canada for that matter. I believe that part of Donald Trump's election victory stems from the fact that too many people felt left behind by the changing domestic and global economy. Some folks, in fact, I would say many folks, are feeling anxious about their place in this new economy and the prospects for them and their children. I believe we'd be foolish to assume that this anxiety that was felt in the U.S. isn't present in our own backyard as well. Frankly, incumbent governments, I believe everywhere, must recognize that there is a real fundamental disconnect between what folks are feeling and the economic indicators that many of us here in this room often talk about. I can tell you as Minister of Economic Development that Ontario's economy is beyond any doubt doing very well these days. Since the depths of the recession in 2009, Ontario's gained 242,000 net new jobs. We're up 235% since the recession in jobs. And while we've seen a troubling rise in precarious work that really cannot be ignored, the fact remains that those new jobs are good jobs. 3/4 of them are in the private sector. 75% of those new jobs pay wages that are above the average. 90% of those jobs are full-time jobs. In fact, we're doing even better in Ontario now than we were before the financial crisis, with employment 5.5% above the pre-recession peak. The unemployment rate, as was mentioned in the economic statement yesterday, is at 6.4%, the lowest it's been since the global recession. And it's been lower than the national average for 18 consecutive months. On Monday, our finance minister indicated that Ontario's GDP growth was going to be projected to be 2.5% this year, better than most advanced countries. In fact, Ontario led the G7 for growth in the first half of this year. So there's really no way to argue against the fact that Ontario's economy overall is strong and is growing. But what I believe Donald Trump tapped into in the U.S., what I believe we in Ontario would ignore at our peril, is the reality that not all Ontarians, not all Canadians, not all regions of our country or our province are feeling included in Ontario's growing prosperity. Some folks feel that they've been left behind, and I think with good reason. I think in some cases, the truth is they have. There are many blue-collar and service workers who lost good-paying jobs in the last recession. Some never recovered and are still outside the labor market. Some have found work, but at a lower wage or part-time work or temp work. Even those who kept or regained their old jobs have sometimes felt as though their incomes have not risen with the cost of living, and they too feel like they've been left behind. Our manufacturing sector was hit very hard during the last recession. The good news is our manufacturing sector has experienced very steady growth ever since. It remains an important part of our economy. Its future remains incredibly bright. But the world has changed, and manufacturing has had to change with it. The truth is, some manufacturing jobs will simply not come back. And it's not because of free trade agreements. That's a convenient excuse or a target. It's really not a lack of sales, product sales or production. That's not what's impacting these jobs, because much of that is back. In fact, in some cases, in record numbers. So as I share accurate assessments of Ontario's economy, as I express optimism and confidence in our economic future, as I have every reason to do, the reality is I must also be aware that there is a significant segment of folks who are anxious about their present and future prospects. An impressive 6.4% unemployment rate is no comfort to someone who has just seen their job replaced by technology. In the U.S., they're at a 4.9% unemployment rate. That's not bad. But when you think about it, that didn't seem to matter on election night last week. President Obama's election plan was fairly successful. Millions of people were lifted out of poverty by good-paying jobs. But in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, there are a number of folks who simply feel left out, and that they didn't have anyone in office speaking for them. In my view, that cannot be ignored. I believe that Donald Trump's campaign struck a chord with Americans who feel disconnected from the economic growth that most others are experiencing. And I think we here in Ontario can learn from that. But we can't romanticize past growth. And by that I mean we can't simply just roll back the clock, and we can't go back to the good old days. We just can't go back to the good old days. It's not possible. What we need to do is plan, build, and excel to be leaders in the good new days ahead. That's what Premier Wynne is doing here in Ontario. That's what Prime Minister Trudeau is doing for Canada. That's what President Obama has been doing for America, and that ultimately is what I believe Donald Trump will try to do as well. Accepting change in our economy and society is not enough. We must drive it to stay one step ahead of it. The alternative is to fall behind, become redundant in today's economy. And so, in Ontario, I'm pleased to say that we choose to lead. At the same time, we cannot leave those folks behind who feel disconnected or frightened by that new economy. We must ensure that they too have a voice. We must ensure that they too have hope for themselves and their kids. Look, we can't change global economic reality. We can't slow down technological disruption, nor do we want to. We can't pretend it would all go away if we close ourselves off and stop trading with the rest of the world. That's just not true. That would mean stagnation, job losses rather than job gains. Romanticizing past growth abdicates our responsibility to build a strong, globally competitive economy for our kids. At the same time, I sense a collective feeling of anxiety about the question, what does a Donald Trump administration mean for Canada's economy and for Ontario's economy? And to that, now that I've had a few days to recover from the shock of the election results, and I think like all of you, to catch up on our sleep after staying up till 3:30 in the morning to get those election results, I think it's time for all of us just together to take a huge, deep, collective breath. Now, come on now. I didn't see you do it. Come on. You need it. Namaste. And I'm not a yoga guy, Eleanor. Eleanor McMahon, our Minister of Cultural Tourism, she probably takes yoga. I've tried it a few times. My body's just not that flexible, but the breathing stuff is good. I'm not at all convinced that the rhetoric we heard in the campaign will transfer into serious problems for Ontario or Canada. I'm not ignoring it either. I think we have to take the potential challenges seriously, and we have to keep our eyes on it, but I think we have to keep it in perspective. And now that I've had an opportunity, and many of us have had an opportunity to emotionally remove ourselves from the result, it's now time for us to take a very clear look at what we really think is likely to happen. Look, the fact of the matter is, it's in the best interest of the United States to continue its trading relationship with Canada. It's that simple. President-elect Donald Trump signaled directly in his first speech, and that was that early morning speech, that he would work in the best interests of the U.S. All presidents would want to do that. All presidents should do that. He also said that he would do his very best to be fair and work with his partners abroad. So when it comes to Ontario and Canada, once you do the math, trade with our jurisdiction is crucial, absolutely crucial, to the new president's efforts to create jobs and grow that U.S. economy. Make no mistake, they need us nearly as much as we need them. The fact is, the president cannot achieve his economic goals without a vibrant, fluent trade and border with Ontario and Canada. I suspect he knows that already. If not, I suspect he soon will. President-elect Trump will soon be informed that Canada and the U.S. do $687 billion of trade every single year. $687 billion. Half of that comes from here in Ontario. I mean, just look at our auto sector. It's actually one big Great Lakes auto cluster. It's the biggest in North America. Ontario and Michigan combined produce more vehicles than all of Mexico. The average vehicle produced in Ontario or Michigan crosses the border 7 times. Just go back and forth 7 times before it rolls off the line. That's the U.S.-Canada, the Michigan-Ontario trade relationship in action. That's why Premier Wynne recently signed an agreement with Michigan Governor Snyder, who was just as eager to sign the agreement, and is a Republican, by the way, to grow that sector together. It would only hurt both of us to put up barriers to that kind of trade. U.S. politicians understand that. All of the Republicans elected along with Donald Trump understand that too. And if the new administration fails to see this, and if they decide they still want to build walls, we in Ontario plan to continue building bridges. Bridges to the U.S., both literally and figuratively. Bridges to all the world markets, whether it's building bridges to Europe through CETA to open up their $18 trillion market to Ontario businesses, or whether it's pursuing opportunities in the expanding economies of the Pacific Rim, which the Premier and I will be going over to in the next couple of weeks on a trip to Japan and Korea with a number of Ontario businesses. We need to keep aggressively pursuing those markets. We should always be pursuing those markets, no matter who the President of the United States is. That being said, I'd argue our biggest challenge is not foreign competition, nor is it trade at all. Our biggest challenge today will come from technological disruption. I mean, just look at the retail sector. People are moving to online purchasing in huge numbers. Last Friday, Alibaba did $24 billion in online sales for its Singles Day, a world record sales record. That means selling $1 billion of product every single hour. That's incredible. Every sector in every part of our economy globally is in a full-fledged state of technological disruption. We here in Ontario are in a unique position to have a globally competitive strength in almost every one of those areas of opportunity. We're leaders in artificial intelligence. We're leaders in sensors. We're leaders in supercomputing. We're leaders in robotics. We're leaders in fintech. We're leaders in bioscience, And we're the global leader in quantum physics. That's a pretty good place to be as the global economy is fast disrupting. Our world-class tech, entrepreneurial, and research talent, our globally competitive tax rates and R&D tax credits, and our thriving business climate are simply undeniable. We've become a globally competitive hotbed of talent and disruptive technology. So much so that when I go abroad to attract investment to Ontario, it's no longer a sales pitch I'm giving, it's a compelling, factual business case. You know, last week I watched a TV program. Bruce Croxon is the host of a BNN show called Disruptors. I recommend it. I think it's a pretty new show because I've never seen it before. Watched a few shows since. What Bruce said was this. He said that while the Trump administration is causing some anxiety in the tech sector in California, and I can tell you I was just there about a month ago, and that was the talk of California and the tech sector. They're not sure how they see themselves in a future Trump administration. And while many in the Valley are looking to Ontario as a greener pasture for future growth, and I have no problem with that, they're welcome to come here. We welcome their investment. We welcome those startups for sure. The fact is that we were already attracting this attention long before Donald Trump became president-elect of the United States. That being said, we're at an inflection point. The window of opportunity is small, and it's beginning to close. Our ability to take advantage will depend on if our future, our ability to take advantage will depend on whether or not we can seize this opportunity to be a global leader or become yet another aspiring follower. So we must seize this moment in time. We must ensure that we seize this momentum while we have it. We must ensure we seize it while we have the talent to succeed. And if we're not diligent about staying at the cutting edge, if we drop our guard for a mere millisecond and coast, we'll go from leaders to followers faster than most Ontarians will even realize that we're in this position of leadership in the first place. And that's why I'm truly excited to lead Ontario's Business Growth Initiative. Now, Business Growth Initiative sounds like just another government program or a gimmick or some kind of buzzwords. It's not words. It's not a gimmick. It's not talking points. It's a plan that recognizes not only where we're strong, but more importantly, where we're weak. We're great at startups. I recently heard at the Ontario Economic Summit last week that we're second in the world per capita when it comes to startups. Now, I haven't fact-checked that yet, but I know we're doing really, really well. Our challenge is to ensure that our entrepreneurs move those startups to scale-ups and move those scale-ups so they can become globally competitive companies and that they can operate that here in Ontario. That means we have to help our fast runners run faster. And we have to focus on those companies in Ontario that have the greatest potential for growth. In many ways, it says goodbye to those feel-good, spread the peanut butter type approaches of government trying to do everything for every sector, for every company. That approach might make us feel good, but in this fiercely competitive global economy, we must focus on where we're strongest. Being good no longer cuts it in this new economy. You only succeed when you're great. And I see this young gentleman here nodding his head vigorously, but it's true. It's about helping those in our economy that are like those scrappy 12-person companies, e-commerce companies you'll see down in Liberty Village. It's helping them become the next Shopify. It's about stemming the tide of startups being lured to the valley in search of the investment dollars that they need to grow, but also encouraging them to continue to think globally. And so today, I'm thrilled to announce a brand new $32 million scale-up voucher program for fast-growing companies. One of the things I've heard most often from our entrepreneurs is the need for companies to get financial support at the precise time when it makes the biggest difference in their company. Here's something I think might appeal to some of the business folks in the room. This is an example of government finally adapting to move at the speed of business. We're going to provide immediate access to specific resources for our high-growth companies precisely when they need it. Businesses that qualify will get resources through this program as quickly as a week, 7 days. Not the 2 months that it sometimes takes us, or the 6 months it sometimes takes us to flow this funding. Now, it can help them do things like hire a world-class chief technology officer to get their tech to market, or it can help them head over to an international trade show to help land an order. We're not talking about huge investments here most of the time. We're talking about sometimes just small help that companies need just to get across that threshold to go from a startup to scale up, or a scale up to go global. I think this program is really going to help. I also want to tell you about our Small Business Innovation Challenge. Another thing that entrepreneurs have told me over the years is they're not always interested in direct government funding at all. What they really prefer is a government contract that provides a platform for them then to go global. You know, this is important because at the same time, governments need the disruptive technology and innovation that only startups can provide. So we're investing $29 million to encourage businesses in Ontario to provide cutting-edge solutions to some of the problems we face as a government. Whether it's clean tech, whether it's smart infrastructure, digital economy type solutions, whatever. These are areas where government needs help, and we need to move beyond some of our traditional problem solvers to tap into some of that incredible creativity that's happening right under our nose here in the province of Ontario. I believe if we fulfill our promise of becoming a global leader, that we will have an opportunity to build a stronger economy for that next generation. But we must support our growth companies in their efforts in order to become that global leader. The results of our efforts to make Ontario a global innovation leader are paying off. I mean, just look at our auto sector. Over $1.5 billion of new investment was announced just in the past couple weeks alone. That supports over 100,000 auto jobs and hundreds of thousands of jobs in communities like Windsor, Oshawa, St. Catharines, Woodstock, Oakville, and Brampton. But also look at GM's decision to hire 1,000 Ontario engineers and technicians. That's just as exciting. They're going to build a globally competitive R&D center there to drive their innovation efforts in the connected and autonomous vehicles. And then look at Ford's recent partnership with BlackBerry's QNX to drive their innovation efforts in the connected car. QNX Platforms, a company here in Ontario that emerged through BlackBerry, can now be found in 75% of the cars around the world. Look at Thomson Reuters' decision to move their CEO and head office from New York to Toronto to be close to our world-class fintech talent. Look at the MOU between Ontario and Quebec, staking out ground in the $19 trillion market for 5G technology. Look at our partnership with IBM that's providing incubator and scale-up opportunities for disruptive tech startups just a few blocks from here in Toronto. Or look at our partnership with Johnson & Johnson and their J-Labs incubator for bioscience startups in Mars. Look at Mars. 2 office towers, chock full of innovation, creativity, research, and next generation growth potential. Look at incubators, tech drivers like Communitech, 111, Ryerson's Digital Media Zone. Look at the flood of innovative global companies investing in Ontario to be close to that innovation talent. Companies like Google, Slack, Amazon, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft, Cisco, right? Cisco. And I could name many, many more, and there are many here in this room that qualify for that as well. Or look at our Made in Ontario growth companies like OpenText, Shopify, QNX, Click, Think Research, Thelmic Labs, Quantum Valley. I met a company this morning that's going with the Premier and I to Japan and Korea called SOTI. I would have thought I would have known of this company. They're growing at 46, they grew at 46% growth this year. They're on their way to growing beyond that for next year. A tech company that's doing really well here, based in Ontario, but in 7 other jurisdictions already in the world. That's what I call going global, and that's what I call scaling. They're the companies that are going to drive Ontario's economy into the future. This truly is a special moment for Ontario. There's no question. But our choice is clear. We either step up and boldly seize this opportunity to be one of the leading innovation hubs in the world, or we sit back and let that opportunity and that window before us today completely shut. Our ability to pass on a vibrant economy to our kids hangs in the balance. all the stars are aligned for Ontario to lead. Our business growth initiative is already paying dividends by driving innovation, by scaling up our fast runners, and making Ontario an easier place to do business. We're really trying to get that job done. But we need to bring all of our people along on this. We need to ensure that Ontarians are aware of just how critical it is to drive these changes. And as the U.S. election pointed out, we must find ways to ensure that all Ontarians can benefit and feel part of our global economy. That's why we made post-secondary tuition free for lower-income families. That's why our Youth Employment Fund has found jobs for over 25,000 young people. That's why we provided greater access to people with disabilities to find jobs. That's why we're investing in infrastructure projects that are putting 100,000 people every single year in the province of Ontario to work. That's why we've aggressively sought auto investments in this province to sustain tens of thousands of middle-income workers in this very important sector for our economy. If we can provide a voice for those who feel they've been left behind, if we can continue to work together as we have in the past, and I believe we will in the future, if we continue to strive to lead tech disruption, which I believe we are, if we maintain a healthy and competitive environment to invest and do business, then together we will succeed in fulfilling our chief responsibility to build a new generation economy that we all will be proud to pass on to our kids and our grandkids. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you.
The minister has agreed to take some questions, so if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll get a mic to you, and he'd be happy to answer anything.
See if this is working. There we go. And I insisted on working away from the podium there so I can be a little closer to you. Don't be shy. Mike, I'm not going to know everybody's names in the room. I just happen to know Mike.
Maybe I could do it without the mic, but
I'll give you mine.
All right. Okay. So, you know, really a wide-ranging discussion, and you laid out so many issues, and you know, like a lot of resonance with myself. You mentioned the next generation, kids, Communitech. So I'm thinking about my two kids that are in Kitchener-Waterloo and seeing the changes that are taking place in our community and the economy. But I also think you really raised a lot of, you know, benchmarks that really need to be addressed. And one, you talked about disruptors. And I'll say on behalf of the Carpenters Union, we recognize that disruptors in our industry are yet to come. So we have to accommodate that and prepare for that. And one of the ways that we're doing it is through collaboration. And over the history and my experience in the construction industry, collaboration hasn't always been the key priority, but it really is there. So I just want to use that to segue to a rather innovative approach around collective bargaining, and that was with Unifor and the auto sector. And I think that that's had some positive impact. And what would your comments be on that approach in terms of what Unifor has done in terms of ensuring that investment is made in Ontario?
Well, that's an excellent question. Let me say that I don't remember a time where I've seen business, labor, and government working so closely together. In particular, going through those labor negotiations, they weren't easy. And it took a lot of courage for Unifor and Jerry Dias to recognize that their first priority had to be to preserve those jobs and get that $1.5 to $1.7 billion of investment here. And he had to convince his members that had to be their first priority. And his members all went along with him and all ratified those votes, which was absolutely critical. So having that partnership is really important. But very important to those negotiations and discussions was the knowledge in the boardrooms in Detroit for those three companies that they had a government in Ontario and a government in Canada that was there if they needed us. Not all of those investments are going to require government support. Some of them will. And we're in discussions with those companies now as to what may well come forward. But without that government support, without governments that are supportive in many other ways as well, in terms of working on things like driving disruptive technology so that those companies can drive their very important disruptive technology from here in Ontario, All of that was a contributor to being able to land those investments, and will be a contributor to landing future investments down the road with those companies. Absolutely important. The second thing I have to say, Mike, because you're with the carpenters, is thank you for the work that you guys do in this province. It is so important, and I didn't talk about the skilled trades here in my speech because that they're included. When we talk about our business community, the trades are an important part of that. And I can tell you, I'm now putting my money where my mouth is, because one of my sons, who I thought was destined to go to law school, is now studying to be construction engineering, and the other one's taking HVAC. So now they're, and the one that was moving from being a lawyer to construction engineer, I almost tried to talk him out of it until he said, "Dad, I've listened to some of your speeches about the trades, and that applies to me too, right? It should be a first choice." And I said, "You're right." And actually, I'm really happy he's chosen that career path. But important part of our economy, for sure. Clap for the trades. Now, don't be shy. Let's get some questions going. Ask some tough questions. The media are here. They know I can handle those tough questions. Yep.
You mentioned in your speech that economic indicators that we use don't always give a full, comprehensive, holistic view of the economy, like GDP and productivity and those type of numbers. What numbers do you think we should start looking at in the future in terms of better indicators?
Well, I'm not sure it's about the indicators. I don't know if there's flaws. I don't think there's flaws with the indicators themselves. I think it's just we have to be sensitive to the fact that even though we're growing at 2.5% and leading the G7, and we've seen 642,000 net new jobs created, that's all good news. There are folks that still aren't feeling that prosperity. So I think there's two things that come out of that. One is we need to continue to ensure that those folks know that they have a voice, not just at Queen's Park, but in Ottawa as well. They need to ensure that we understand some of the challenges that they have. And we as governments need to make sure we're doing everything we can to bring them into that prosperity. And I mentioned a few of the things that we're doing that I think it would appeal to that demographic. You know, the lower tuition cost is a real help to those kinds of families. And the investments we make with the auto sector. Those are those middle-class, middle-income jobs that are so important to us that we want to continue to maintain. I know there's a number of folks here from the tech sector, and that's really important. We're second in North America in ICT next to the Valley. Great place to be. Great place for the next generation economy. But we also are a very strong industrial economy here, and we can do both because they're both interconnected now. And if we're leading in disruptive technology in auto and in robotics and sensors, we can continue to be a leader in manufacturing as well. Because manufacturing, Ian Howcroft was here, and I think he's just slept out, but he'll tell you our manufacturing sector is a great place to have a career, and a great place, and it's growing. But there's a public perception that that we have dying industries. Look, any dying industries in this province died off during the global recession. Those industries that are left are in a growth mode now, and pretty much all of them are growing, whether it's aerospace, whether it's auto, whether it's all the other manufacturing that we do across the province, or whether it's food processing, which is another form of manufacturing where we're again second to California and North America at. So these are all important parts of the economy, and we need to speak to all Ontarians and all Canadians when we're doing public policy.
Have time
Yes.
for one more question right here. Thank you.
Hi, Minister. Thanks very much for your speech and for the timely reminder, I think, of what we have to start thinking about after the Trump election. We're in the college sector, and the day after the election, there was a 70% increase in inquiries about coming to Ontario colleges from the U.S. So clearly some opportunities. And I guess to my point, supposedly there may be an enormous trillion-dollar investment in infrastructure in the U.S. in the coming years. Do you think that there may be value, or there's a way to marry the economic agenda to the post-secondary agenda in Ontario and see if we can't encourage young people to come here for school and then find a way to keep them here to help staff up our highly skilled workforce?
Well, I think it's always important to try to encourage people, not just from the U.S., but all over the world to come here, and we do a reasonably good job of that. Our colleges and our universities are doing fantastic work internationally. and they're recognized as among the top institutions anywhere in the world today, which is fantastic. And it's important because many of those young people are the best and brightest talent in the world, that when they come here, they don't want to go back home, they stay. So we do get a lot of that. I would say that more of a priority to me would be appealing to the 500,000 Canadians currently residing in the Silicon Valley area in California. And many of them, as they've gone down there as single people with their startups and been very successful, are now having families. And many of them are thinking about, because I go down there a lot, and I do speak to those folks a lot. Many of them are thinking now that they're feeling a little homesick, that they want to be closer to their families as they grow families themselves. They're very successful people that bring a lot of investment dollars with them. And many of them are thinking of doing their next startups here. Many of them have moved their companies here. So it's not I'd love to see it as a huge flow happening, but it's happening more than it's happened in the past. So I think there's a huge opportunity right now, and yes, there's no question. You see the news. There's folks in California that aren't feeling exactly connected to what's happening, in the rest of the U.S. I get that. My view is ultimately that will probably simmer down, depending on what the new president does. But I think the new president, his intentions are going to be good, and I expect to see him reach out. I expect to see him reach out soon. I'm not advising him, so I don't know what he's going to do. But I expect to see him reach out soon to those in the U.S. that are feeling anxious about his presidency. And my expectation is when that happens, things will simmer down a little bit. But the reason I made that quote from Mr. Croxon from that Business News Network show is he's bang on. There has been a very significant interest and flow of investment coming up from the Silicon Valley to Ontario in recent years. Venture capital funding now is up 251% in Ontario, and I think that's just over the last 4 or 5 years, which is significant. Now in the Valley, they're up about 700%. We've gone, though, from 14th in North America for venture capital to 6th. So what that tells me is that we're now seeing, we are the fastest moving innovation market in North America, and we're seeing that. I can tell you that. I'm a politician. Of course, I'm economic development minister. I'm going to tell you that. But dollars aren't looking for votes, and dollars aren't looking for your support. That's the true measure, in my view, that we're having success when we see us moving that far up the rankings in terms of venture capital. Those folks are voting with their dollars, and that's great news. That's great news for Ontario, and it's really because of our talent. It's because of the incredible innovation, talent, and the entrepreneurs that we have here in Ontario that are seen now as the best in North America, if not the best in the world. And really what my speech was about is, regardless of what happens with regard to relations with the U.S., and I'm optimistic they'll go reasonably well, our strength is the strength you want to have in this fast disrupting global economy, and that's the strength of talent, innovative thinkers, and startup companies that are second to none in the world. I don't think there's any other strength that I'd rather have as an economic minister, and that's what gives me cause for absolute optimism for our ability as a generation to pass on an economy to that next generation that may even be stronger than the one that we inherited. So I think that's a good time to close.
Perfect.
It sounded
Thank
like
you.
Thank you.
And I'd now like to ask Canadian Club Director Willa Black to formally thank the minister.
Very much, Fred. Minister Duguid, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I'd like to thank you for so eloquently outlining the details of your vision for economic growth and prosperity in Ontario, and for being so enthusiastic and passionate about it. Fantastic. I'd also like to thank you for your candid comments about recent political events in the United States. As we all know, Ontario's economy is deeply tied to that of our neighbor to the south, so we appreciate your forward-looking thoughts on that today. An innovation-driven economy, in your words, the hotbed of talent and disruptive technology, one where everyone can participate and benefit from economic growth, is the way forward for Ontario for sure. We are excited by the plans that your ministry is working on, especially some of the specific initiatives that you mentioned today. The Scale-Up Voucher, the Small Business Innovation Challenge, scaling startups, focusing on innovation, and ensuring that Ontarians have the skills for the jobs of today and tomorrow. All these things will absolutely position us to, again in your words, succeed and lead. Now, more than ever, the importance of collaboration and partnership are vital to economic development and growth, and your examples underscore this fact. We're energized by the experience, enthusiasm, and results that you bring to your portfolio. You certainly have a complex and ambitious mandate. What we believe that with your vision and your leadership, that we will seize this moment in time and help our fast runners run faster. Please accept our best wishes as you continue to advocate on behalf of Ontarians for a prosperous and dynamic tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Willa. I also want to express my thanks, Minister, for your strong support for economic development in Ontario, and in particular for your unknown DJ skills. I really appreciated that. I also want to extend another round of thanks to our Ontario series sponsors, Bruce Power and the Carpenters District Council of Ontario, and also to today's event sponsors, Bombardier and DealNet Capital. Thank you very much. This concludes our program today, which will be broadcast on Rogers TV in the days to come. We're grateful to Rogers TV and 680 News for their continuing promotion of Canadian Club events. I also want to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at another of our events in the near future. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.